Hey guys, Matthew here, and welcome to episode number 4 of the Abusing Harvest series. Today we'll be talking about perfect Stygian vises. So I made a poll on the YouTube, and you guys decided that perfect Stygians was the next thing you wanted to see, and then honestly, between physical weapons and VD1s, it was almost exactly the same, but perfect Stygian seems to be the one to take the cake. So it's going to be a really short video, to be honest, because fortunately, Stygian vises are incredibly easy to craft this league. So the perfect Stygian vise is actually a craft that you could say, abused a little bit at the beginning of the league. I probably made 4 of them, and it would cost me anywhere in between 12 to 15x to make, and I was selling them for over 50. That being said, now that a lot more people have caught on how to make them, their value has dropped tremendously, and also because the crafts are so much more affordable and so much more common, it's made it so easily to actually make these that they are no longer really worth it in terms of pure profit. That being said, clearly, if that many people are interested in knowing how to make the perfect Stygian, at least when it comes to life and resistance Stygians, maybe for solo self-found, you could literally make a 6 tier 1 perfect Stygian Vise in solo self-found fairly easily, and stuff like that. The hardest part would probably be to acquire the base. Anyways, so the perfect Stygian, in my opinion, is a Stygian with T1 life, T1% life, T1 elemental damage with attack skills, or percent crafted damage, which is a 1 Exalt craft, followed by triple T1 resistances. It could be cold, could be lightning, could be fire, could be chaos, but a mix of 3 of those, all as tier 1s. So where you're going to start off is obviously to get you're going to need a Stygian Vise, preferably level 86 if you want elemental damage with attack skills, because the T1 is item level 86, as you can see right here. That being said, if you don't care too much about elemental damage with attack skills, so if you're going to play a build that you're going to craft percent damage instead, then item level 84 is all you need for tier 1 resistances, and chaos resistance is actually item level 81. While percent life is also item level 84, so 84 would be perfectly fine if you're playing a non-attack build. That being said, after you've gotten your Stygian Vise of item level 84 or 86, you will need a Hunter Exalted Orb, so you can slam it, and then you get yourself a Stygian Vise with both, with the Hunter influence on it. From there on, you scour that base, and you're simply going to spam fossils as you see fit, as many as you can afford, realistically. The average is 55 pristine fossils to hit both the flat life as tier 1 and the percent life as tier 1. So this would be your starting point, if you will. It would cost you about 55 pristine fossils to get yourself a tier 1 T1. Now, the only problem with this, unfortunately, is that there is another life roll that can roll. As you can see, that has a times 10 on the weighting, and that is increased flask life recovery rate. Unfortunately, there is nothing you can do in terms of seed crafting or anything else to get rid of this flask life recovery rate if you do happen to get it. So if while rolling your pristine fossils you get your flat life and your percent life of both tier 1s, and you also get flask life recovery rate, unfortunately, you kind of don't really have a choice but to go for a YOLO annul. So take a 1 in 3 chance to actually get rid of that stat, so that you can finish off with the wed or the crafted percent damage. So while it does say that the average is 55, you do have to consider that this mod is going to show up. As you can see, it has a 7.244 chance of showing up as a prefix, which is just as common as, say, the percent life. So on average, though, most items that are rare in Path of Exile are going to be 4-stat items. Then a significantly smaller portion is going to be 5-stat items, and a much significantly smaller, once again, portion of the item are going to roll as 6-stat items. So every time you roll basically a resonator on an item, there is about a, I believe, 60% chance that the item rolls a 4-stat item, which is basically based on the affix percentages rate. So for example, a Stygian Vise has 67% chance to roll prefixes, because 67% of the weighting is going to be under prefixes. That is obviously counting in the fact that you're using pristine fossils, and the suffixes only account for about 30%. Which means that when rolling a 4-stat items, typically you're going to see, two prefixes and 2 suffixes, or 3 prefixes and 2 suffixes. But when rolling a 5-stat item, most of the time you're going to see 3 prefixes and 2 suffixes. Very rarely will you roll a 5-stat Stygian with pristine fossils and see 3 suffixes and only 2 prefixes. So that does mean that this flash life recovery rate here is a little bit annoying, and therefore these 55 required to hit both the life and the percent life, well, about 1 in 2 tries, or about half the time, you're also going to get this flash life recovery rate alongside the other 2 mods, so you're going to go ahead and need to annul, which means the actual amount of pristine fossils is probably more in the ballpark of 100. Fortunately, that is the only thing that is expensive when it comes to rolling these perfect Stygians. After that, it's a breeze. Once you've got your flat life and percent life perfect as tier 1s, so for example, I have a Stygian Vise laying around right here. That is exactly that, T1 life, T1 percent life. Then you're going to go ahead and do your suffixes, which would be resistances, as mentioned previously, and you'd finish it off with either the elemental damage with attack skills and the percent damage craft. So how you're going to do that is very, very easy. As you can see, the prefixes don't really have any tags related to any of these modifiers that the resistances have tags to. So for example, chaos, cold, fire, and lightning. The only one is percent chaos damage as a prefix. So let's say you don't want this, but you would like to have chaos resistance on your belt. You will want to make sure to craft a prefix on the belt. So for example, if I was to take my own belt, I would have to make sure to craft any prefix, it doesn't matter what. The only reason why this matters, and the reason why we are crafting a prefix here, is basically to block the prefix. So if I was to take this belt, for example, and I wanted chaos resistance on it, I would craft a 3rd prefix, meaning there would be no open prefixes left, and then I would augment a chaos modifier. And as you can see, once there's no more prefixes, there's nothing else with the chaos tag except for chaos resistance, so I would be guaranteed chaos resistance. After that, obviously I can reroll it until I have tier 1 roll by doing remove chaos modifier, add a new chaos modifier for a 1 in 6 chance of getting tier 1. Now, of course, if I don't care about chaos resistance and I would like to have a triple elemental resistance belt like fire, cold, and lightning, there is no prefixes with these tags whatsoever, so I don't have to worry about blocking a prefix or anything like that. And instead, what I can do to make it even cheaper than for myself, since augments are actually more expensive than remove and add, what I could do, for example, with this belt, if I wanted to get cold resistance on it, I could go ahead and craft the cold resistance and then do remove cold modifier, add a new cold modifier, and that would guarantee that I would actually get cold resistance that is no longer crafted, but it would be cheaper than to actually buy a cold augment, and also it's more common to find if you are in SSF or something like that. So you would go ahead and do that for cold, then you would have cold resistance, then you'd craft a fire resistance roll, do remove fire modifier, add new fire modifier, boom, you've got your fire, do the same thing for lightning, and then you reroll them until they're all T1. As you can see, it is a 1 in 8 chance to actually get the tier 1 roll, so it's not super common, but it's not crazy either. You can also accept T2 if it's for yourself or if it's for SSF. Obviously, if you're going for a perfect 6 tier 1 Stygian Vise, you will need to roll until you have everything as tier 1. And then finally, once you have your life, your percent life, and your resistances, you will finish off with either elemental damage with attack skills or percent crafted damage. If you do go with the elemental damage with attack skills route, it's very easy. As you can see, it has the attack tag, and nothing else on a Stygian Vise has the attack tag anywhere else. Also, the suffixes wouldn't matter anyways, since you would have 3 of them already, and there is no other attack tag based prefixes on a Hunter Stygian Vise. Therefore, the only thing you could augment realistically is elemental damage with attack skills, and rerolling it to a tier 1 roll would take on average 6 rerolls, and those are fairly cheap as well, which would lead you to a perfect Stygian Vise with T1 life, T1 percent life, T1 wed, and triple tier 1 resistances. These cost, like I said, about 10 to 15 exalts to make, depending pretty much entirely on your luck when it comes to rerolling them, and they used to sell for a lot. I easily made over a mirror profit on the few that I did craft in the beginning of the league. Now, of course, as I mentioned, this market is very saturated now because they're extremely easy to craft. But for the people who weren't aware of how to start off, I've had a few people ask me basically where to start with them, and you want to start with the life and the percent life, because if you started with the resistances, for example, then you'd have to do remove, add life modifiers, and as you can see, the odds of hitting tier 1 life is fairly rare. And then let's say you do hit tier 1 life with, I don't know, like flash life recovery, and you have to remove a life modifier and add a new one. You're not guaranteed to not hit your tier 1 flat life, so you might end up needing tons and tons and tons of remove life, add life to get the T1 flat and the T1%. While if you start with that using pristine fossils, it makes it way, way, way easier. So that is about all I had to say when it comes to perfect Stygian Vises. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. As always, I do want to say a huge thank you to my supporters: Guy Kona, Kfish, Zachary, Luro, Scott, Dr. Radu, Cassicus, Francesco, Amazo, Skorov, Mr. Coffee, and Mario, as well as anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous. The next video is going to be on physical-based weapons, because that was the next thing in the poll that had the most votes. So that will be coming out more than likely tomorrow. So hopefully you enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.